Raising Unicorns!
Harmon Brothers!
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Raising Unicorns podcast. I have next to me today the one and only Bryson Alley.
Hello.
What's up, Bryson?
How's it going?
In the trenches at HB.
Harmon Brothers is a unique beast because most of the time in the advertising world, there is a advertising agency who comes up with the creative. There's copywriters and there's creative directors who then go and get the concept kind of approved by the client, and then they go shop it out to a production house and a post-production house. And they supervise it and they're involved in that with the client. But usually, like, we're an odd beast because everything we basically do in-house. We take writing, production, post-production, we control a whole pipeline, which I think is one of the reasons we've attributed our success to that is we have really good quality control. But it's also like a unique thing. So whenever I'm talking to people about my job and I describe like the visual effects side of things, they're always like, but you're an advertising agency?
Yeah.
You know, they get a kind of a perplexed look at us.
We're not a VFX house.
Yeah.
We have a couple of artists at any one time.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I think it's unique with having you in-house that I've noticed over the years is oftentimes when you don't have that in-house capability, the creatives will go and do, like, they'll write something and they're like, here's a concept. And then they'll get to post-production or get to production. They'll be like, you don't have budget to do that. So you have to make massive compromises or like, oh, I would have done it differently.
Yeah.
And so I think having you in-house has been interesting, having like kind of the feedback loop along the whole creative process, because I found, especially over the last probably 5 years, that's been a bigger part of our process of like, kind of like, could we do X? No, but we could do Y. And then forming the creative along the process.
Yeah, you're talking about bringing the VFX
into the conversation,
into the pre-production, into the writing. And that has been huge.
Yeah, I think one of the examples that comes to mind with that, with like visual effects, is when we had a brand that we worked with called Next Vacay, which was the travel deal service where you get an email notification if there's a good deal coming out of your local airport. And so we knew we couldn't just be like, let's film this whole thing in an airplane. Yep. We got to film this on location. If you're listening audio version, I air quoted that for these actual destinations. And it was like, we were scrambling because I remember Josh, our producer, and I were like, maybe we could double like down in California, some beach locations. And like, maybe we could double like something in like, maybe up in Wyoming, like for something up like in the Alps, if we want to do something up like in the Teton region. And we were just scrambling to see like, what could we fake as X? And then we were trying to build like the budgets for traveling and shooting. And like, then we were just like immediately like, this is impossible to move a crew. Oh, and not to mention the concept that we landed on was a tree woman who took an enormous amount of prosthetics and about 3 hours to get ready every day and require a huge hair and makeup trailer. So it literally would have been impossible, like with the budget we had, to travel to those different locations. And then we're still faking it. The cool thing that we did on that one is like Bryson like had this idea of basically just saying, okay, let's do some practical elements that can connect with Trina, our tree woman, and then we'll do compositing and we'll actually go shoot the plates ourselves or find the plates ahead of time. And when I say plates, that's the backgrounds that we're putting into the green screen elements. Shoot those ahead of time so we have the exact measurements and everything looks right. FYI, for all you marketing folk who don't know visual effects, half the time a green screen looks bad when they put in the replacement background is because the lighting doesn't match your footage you're shooting in front of a green screen, or the height of the camera, the focal distance is off, and your brain is really good at being like, that's not right. Weird, that looks weird. Yeah. And so, but Bryson was like, if we could get all these things ahead of time and I can match them when we're actually filming and lighting it with the same type of light and direction of light, shape of light, it like blew me away.
A lot of the tools used for visual effects have come down in price and have risen in quality massively over the last 5 or 10 years. I didn't go to school for visual effects, but I did take some classes and we were using really expensive software and it took, a lot of time. As soon as I left school, I couldn't afford those programs. And so I found one called Blender that's free, still free to this day. And it blows my mind that it is. It's a very powerful piece of software. And there's so much training on YouTube for free. I mean, there are courses you can pay for as well that are really high quality. But the democratization of these tools, cameras have gotten cheaper and better. 3D software has gotten cheaper and better. There's compositing software that you can use for free. DaVinci Resolve is free. So all of these tools are allowing us to do more and more in the same amount of time and with the same budget, which is great.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's like the next, because I think to speak what you were just saying, the next wave, I think, is going into AI. Before, it just felt like software becoming democratized, or even some hardware with cameras, like you said. It used to be cost prohibitive, are now accessible. I think now the next wave, I think, that we're really seeing right now and that we're starting to utilize is AI. And a lot of this is for replacing really what I've seen is like really monotonous, repetitive tasks in visual effects, which if you guys don't know, if you're not in the visual effects side or haven't been around it, so much of visual effects and like the actual number of hours, probably like 80% of the actual hours is around brutal, just like painstaking, monotonous grunt work.
Yeah, there's a lot of just pixel by pixel, frame by frame, painting out, cutting out. Even with the green screen, there's still a lot of finessing to do around fine hair details and removing, the green light that's bouncing onto your actors. Beyond that, there's hours spent just waiting for your computer to render the images, right? AI is going to touch all of these areas and make a lot of that grunt work, like you said, go a lot faster, which is great news for me.
Great news for you. Because I mean, ultimately, like what I think about like the efficiencies it gains us, more of your time can be focused on the actual like fun creation versus like, I know exactly what I want, but I'm having to grind it out just to barely get this result. And then there's so much energy that's poured into that we would rather put into creative itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it gives us. It allows us to expand the creative focus onto other areas that actually impact the ad, not just getting it done to a bare minimum, right?
Yeah. And it lets you funnel your dollars into really fun, like you said, creative areas. I saw recently some people who are doing really fun things with AI where, like this, if you're shooting an interview or a commercial even in front of a blank gray wall, you can take that photo into Photoshop and expand the edges and just tell it to fill it in, like put a window over here, put some plants over here. You can build out a set like that where you don't have to, again, like we were saying, cut out the actors frame by frame because we're using the back wall. We're just changing what's on the side. So it saves a lot of time, and you can use that money then, invest in a couple of good lights and then just use AI to expand that image. And you've got a great looking set for a lot cheaper. So
what other areas like have you seen or identified that like are probably going away pretty quickly besides like background extension, but like that would be huge for expanding our like capability to do something?
I don't know if things are going away. So much
or being replaced, right? Like
most
processes.
of what I do is either adding things to the frame or removing things from the frame. And AI can help with both of those. We've talked about expanding the frame and kind of adding things like that. It's also very good at removing things. We were on a project recently that we just wrapped up. We had some video of our actress in front of a background, and we needed a shot without her in it, but we didn't have it. So he was able to go in Photoshop and just kind of select her and say remove. And the AI just filled in the background behind her. And it was some shelving, and it was it put some decorations on the shelves. It matched the angles and the lighting perfectly. And that's something we could have done before with Photoshop, but it would have taken a few hours
forever.
or a day. And this took a matter of minutes, and Photoshop especially offers you a few options so you can kind of toggle through and say, okay, this is one I like best.
They're like, do you want a pair of eyes on the shelf?
It just kind of comes up with 3 different options, and
some of them are freaking creepy.
AI isn't perfect yet. There's a lot of things it does well and a lot of things it doesn't do quite well yet.
So one of the things that we've been using quite a bit that I would love to hear your perspective on, Bryson, and use cases, especially like I think this is a good one for people who might be smaller, scrappier, like outfits, or, agencies that are starting out, or companies that are trying to produce their own internal video. But we have been using a ton of OLED screens in place or in lieu of green screens, because green screen is kind of complicated. You got to key the green out and put in something else and replace the background, which requires some level of technical skill as far as like compositing. Yeah. But talk me through like some of the ways you've seen us use OLEDs in production and how that's made that super easy.
We've got a couple of 85-inch,
77-inch
OLED TVs that are very bright and very high definition. And we've been able to use those instead of a green screen in certain cases. They work well when you're close up on a subject. So it's not your wide shot. Obviously, you can't get the edges of the screen in the shot, but we've been able to use them for product shots, putting a nice background behind your product sitting on a table. We've even been able to use them just outside of a car. We'll pull the car into the garage, put the TV right outside the window, and then film through the other window, and just have a street passing on a loop. And you still have to hit your actors with a lot of light and set up a lot of those lighting setups. But
you can see it in camera though, is the big difference.
Yeah, it works pretty well, and it gets you most of the way there. And then you can clean it up a little bit in post and, play with the brightness and stuff. But yeah, it's given us a lot of flexibility to do things like that, where we don't have to rent, a truck and a trailer and drag a car and rent the whole street and shut everything down.
We filmed it in our basement.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gives you control over the weather. You don't have to worry about if it's raining or whatever.
Yeah. This is something obviously like Mandalorian made this technology really popular,
Yeah.
but then like another movie that came out within the last year or so that did a really good use of this was the Batman. And they used a lot of like close panels that were similar. I mean, they have like big, fancy, nice panels that are made for this.
Yeah. We've gotten a lot of use out of our TVs for, close product shots, pickup shots, car shots. Yeah.
Oh, and Next Vacate, we did the window
versatile
there too.
Yeah, that's true. We stuck it. Oh, that's a great point. We've taken them on set a couple of times. Next Vacate, we used it. We had kind of the shell of an airplane or half of it, they were sitting in it, and we stuck it right outside the window just to get that light coming in. And it meant I didn't have to do that in post. I didn't have to cut out a green screen
because it was in
light coming in.
Ton of shots.
Yeah. Yeah. So we use that all the time. Yeah.
So when we have our team of writers who are going, like, there's a little bit of a high bar or expectation to just go freaking nuts
Yeah.
on our concepts. And we've had some wild ones thrown out there,
Yeah.
which is what we love. But at the same time, though, it's one of those things where we always have to ask ourselves, like, is this pushing the commercial in the right direction and for the right reason? Like, is it driving the sale?
Right.
Is it emphasizing like the value this brings to the customer? And I think that's like one of the benefits in the trap of VFX is it's really easy to get lost on like, oh, but it'd be so cool to see.
It'd be so fun.
It's so memorable, but if it's not memorable and tied into the concept, even though it's fun, it can waste a lot of time and energy and not ultimately achieve the goal that the client wants, which is getting like the actual brand recognition and increased sales, right? And I think that's in general, like for all creative, if it doesn't come back to the ad, like you're wasting your time. But I think VFX is even more so because VFX for a very short period of time on frame can cost a ton of money. Yeah. And so that's why like when we make those decisions for like something like Next Vacay or for Kodiak Cakes, we're like, the bear is their logo. The bear is like part of their brand identity at its core. And like they're a rustic brand. So this is a good use of it. And let's make sure even when we're showing him on the bear, he's eating a stack of flapjacks. You know what I mean? So we try to make sure
it all ties back
on our expensive shot, it ties back to the objective of getting more awareness and driving more sales for the client.
I think the best cases are when your VFX can help you illustrate the problem that the product is solving, right? I remember we did one for SheerTex. And so this is kind of, we're talking about VFX, but we had her actually rappelling off a building using SheerTex material, and that part was not VFX. What we used VFX for was to kind of extend the background and show her in a different city than we were able to film in.
Turns out we don't live in San Francisco.
Turns out. But that was the point of the VFX, was telling the story, showing the problem or the solution of the product, right? I think that's the best.
Yeah, and I think that's what it all comes back to, and like why we use VFX in our ads is because if it tells the story better and it makes it more memorable, like we're going to do a better job for our clients. And, unfortunately, you just can't do it all practically. I wish we could have filmed with a bear practically. I wish we could have put Kurt Maloney on that bear. I wish we could have actually shot a bow and arrow at Lisa Valentine Clark and she could have caught it out of midair.
Classic.
But sometimes, kids, that's not safe. And actually, most of the things we do are not safe. To wrap it up, out of all the things we discussed about today, is there one thing, like one takeaway that you want our audience to come away with that kind of think is the most valuable nugget or gem that we had in there?
I think using visual effects and AI in really creative ways to maximize your dollars, whether it's using a TV screen as a background for your product or actors, or whether you're using AI to build out a set, and make it look a lot bigger or fancier than it is.